The wagon wheels had barely stopped when Jack Hollister threw open the front door. Cold air rushed through the porch and turned his breath into pale clouds. The late winter sun hung low behind the ridge, and every shadow in the yard stretched long and sharp across the frozen ground. A young woman stepped down from the wagon. She was larger than he expected, bundled in a faded winter dress with a worn shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. Her hands trembled on the handle of an old suitcase. She looked tired, hopeful, and completely wrong. Jack stared at her in disbelief as the truth slammed into him. "Damn it. Represent, are you people playing games with me?" He shouted toward the driver. "I ordered someone else. Not her." The wagon driver lifted both hands. "Sir, this is the one they sent." Jack looked up at the sinking sun. Light was fading fast, and the cold was deepening by the minute. He dragged a hand across his jaw, angry at the sky and angry at himself for being caught in this mess. "If that sun were not going down," he growled, "I would throw you out of my gate this instant." He jabbed a finger toward the old storage shed at the end of the yard. "You sleep in the barn, not a step inside my house, and at first light, you get off my land. Understood?" Eleanor Briggs swallowed hard. Her eyes shimmered, but she held them steady. She lowered her gaze, lifted her heavy suitcase, and nodded. The last strip of daylight slipped behind the ridge, and the wind changed. Winter was far from done with either of them. The wind shifted as Eleanor walked toward the shed. A low rumble rolled across the valley. Snowflakes drifted sideways in thin white lines. The sky no longer looked like evening. It looked like trouble. Gus Bishop snapped the reins and called back to Jack. "That storm is coming fast. You send her down that road now, and she will not make it a mile." Jack cursed under his breath. He hated being boxed in by weather. He hated feeling tricked even more. The cold reached through his coat and grabbed at the scar on his shoulder. The ache grew sharper with every gust. He watched Eleanor struggle with the shed door. Her suitcase slipped in the snow. She bent to pick it up and nearly lost her balance. For a moment, Jack saw something in her face. Not weakness. Not foolish hope. Something quieter. A person used to being unwanted. He turned away from the sight and strode across the yard. He grabbed an old wool blanket off a hook and tossed it into the shed doorway. "Use that," he muttered. "Just do not freeze on my property." Eleanor clutched the blanket against her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was small but steady. The wind picked up fast. Snow swirled across the yard and hissed against the fence rails. The first wave of the storm hit the roof with a hollow thud. Jack headed back toward the house when it came. A long, desperate cry from the cattle barn. One of the cows was in trouble. Jack stopped in the snow. The storm had arrived, and the night was about to get worse. Jack grabbed a lantern and ran for the barn. Snow hammered into his boots. The storm was already thick enough to blur the world into gray. Tommy Fitch met him at the door with panic in his eyes. "It is Daisy," Tommy said. "She is trying to calve, but it is not moving. She is going down." Jack stepped inside. Warm breath from the herd hit his face. The cow lay on her side. Her flanks trembled. The calf was stuck. He felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. A lost calf meant a hard winter ahead. A lost cow meant worse. He rolled up his sleeves and reached in, but the pain in his old shoulder flared hard. His grip faltered. "Tommy, pull when I say." Tommy tried. He pulled once, then twice. His strength failed both times. The calf did not budge. A voice came from behind them. "Move. Let me help." Eleanor stood in the doorway. Snow clung to her hair and lashes. She had thrown Jack's old blanket around her shoulders like a shawl. Her breath came fast, but her eyes were calm. "You know what you are doing?" Jack asked. "I helped with animals back home," she said. "Let me try." Jack hesitated, but only for a second. He stepped aside. Eleanor knelt in the straw. She spoke softly to the cow. She waited for the next contraction and pulled with her whole body. Straw shifted under her boots. Muscles in her arms shook with effort. The calf slid an inch, then another. "One more," she said. "Hold her steady." The next contraction came. Eleanor braced her feet. She pulled with a deep, powerful motion. The calf spilled free into the straw. Wet, weak, alive. Eleanor wrapped it close and rubbed its chest until it squeaked its first breath. Relief spread across the barn like warm light. Jack watched her. Snow melting in her hair. Straw stuck to her sleeves. A strength he had never expected. And for the first time that night, the storm did not feel like the worst thing that had happened to him. The storm passed sometime near dawn. A pale gray light crept through the gaps in the barn boards. The air smelled of warm cattle, clean straw, and new life. Eleanor slept beside the calf. She had curled against a stack of hay with the blanket pulled over her shoulders. One arm rested lightly across the little animal's side. The calf breathed slow and steady. Daisy watched them both with quiet trust. Jack stood in the doorway, lantern in hand, boots still wet from the night. She had worked until her arms shook. She had stepped into danger without being asked. She had saved the calf that Tommy could not lift and Jack could not reach. He moved closer. The straw rustled under his boots. He reached down and tucked the blanket higher around her neck so the morning cold would not reach her. His hands paused for a moment. If she had not been here, he thought, that calf would be gone. A simple truth. A hard one to ignore. Eleanor stirred but did not wake. Her face looked softer in the morning light. Tired. Strong. Honest in a way that unsettled him. Jack stepped back. He did not want Tommy or anyone else to see the shift already taking root inside him. But it was there, and it was real. The storm did not end clean. It lingered over the valley in long strips of gray. Broken clouds drifted low. The yard was buried in snow up to Jack's boots. The cold cut like a blade. Eleanor stepped out of the barn with the blanket still around her. She blinked against the light. Her hair was a mess. Her dress was stained with straw and dirt. She looked like someone who had fought all night and somehow won. Jack tried not to look at her for too long. He failed. "Tommy," he said, "clear the path to the trough. Eleanor, help him." Eleanor nodded. She pushed through the snow with strong, steady strides. She did not complain. She did not ask questions. She lifted a shovel and worked beside Tommy until both of them were covered in white powder from head to toe. Jack kept checking on them from the porch. He told himself it was to make sure they did not mess anything up. The truth was harder to ignore. She worked harder than Tommy. She worked harder than most men he had hired. She did not stop to rest. When noon came, she slipped into the kitchen and used whatever she could find. Old bread crusts, a scrap of beef tallow, a carrot that should have been thrown out. She turned it all into a hot soup that warmed the whole room. Jack ate in silence. Every spoonful landed heavy, not because it was bad, because it was good, better than good. He watched her from the corner of his eye. He was not ready to admit anything. Not yet. The storm loosened its grip on the second day, but the cold stayed sharp. The roof of the calf shed had taken damage during the night. Jack climbed up to check it, but the wind pushed hard against his shoulder. The pain made him wince. Eleanor saw it from below. I can help, she said. You will not get on that roof, Jack said. It is not safe. She ignored his tone and handed him a hammer. Then hold the boards while I climb. Jack stared at her. She stared back. Her eyes did not flinch. He gave in without a word. She climbed with slow, careful steps. She braced the loose boards while Jack nailed them down. Snow drifted across the roof. Her hair blew around her face. She kept working. By the time they climbed down, both of them were flushed from the cold. Jack looked away fast so she would not see the way his gaze lingered. That night, the house was quiet. The world outside was soft and white. Christmas night felt lonely in a way Jack had not expected. He found Eleanor in the kitchen stirring something over the stove. A small candle lit the counter. She had baked a tiny loaf of sweet bread. It was not much, just sugar, flour, a memory of better holidays. Jack stood in the doorway. The road is still blocked. You are not going anywhere. Eleanor turned. I understand. You stay here, he said. Work, eat, sleep, until the weather clears. It was not kindness. Not exactly. But it was the first thread of something warmer. By day 3, the storm had broken. Sunlight spilled over the fields in weak gold. Snow covered everything in a thick, quiet blanket. The world looked new but cold. Jack handed Eleanor a pair of work gloves. They were worn but clean. These fit better than freezing your hands off, he said. She slipped them on. They fit well. Thank you, she said softly. They worked through the morning. She helped him check the fences along the north line. She carried wood. She hauled water. She asked how things should be done, then did them without complaint. Jack kept waiting for her to slow down. She never did. At one point, he slipped on a patch of ice near the creek. Eleanor reached out fast and caught his arm. Jack steadied himself. Their faces were close for one brief heartbeat. He pulled back, but his voice was different when he spoke again. Watch the ice. It forms quick. I will, she said. A faint smile touched her mouth. Later that afternoon, she brushed snow off the calf barn roof with a long pole. The calf followed her around the yard. Daisy the cow watched with calm approval. Tommy laughed under his breath. They like her, he said. Jack only grunted, but the truth settled deep. The place felt different with her in it. Less silent, less cold. When the day ended, Eleanor left a small tin on Jack's porch. Inside was a biscuit she had saved from breakfast. No note, no explanation. Jack looked at it for a long time before taking it inside. Winter settled into a softer rhythm. Jack and Eleanor moved around each other with a growing ease. She learned the routines fast. He spoke to her more often. Little things at first. Short questions. Simple instructions. Then real conversation. One morning, they worked side by side in the woodshed. Snow dust drifted through the open slats. She held the logs while he split them. Each swing of the axe echoed through the yard. She watched the rhythm, then matched it as she stacked the wood. You work steady, Jack said. It helps me think, she answered. What do you think about? Where I fit in this world. Jack paused. The axe hung in the air. You fit better here than most. Eleanor blinked. The words hit deeper than he intended. She smiled but did not look up. It was a small smile. Quiet. Real. Later that day, a gust of wind blew through the yard and knocked Jack's hat off his head. Eleanor laughed for the first time since she had arrived. A warm, soft sound that carried further than the wind. Jack stared at her like he had never heard laughter before. When the sky turned pink, She checked the calf's hooves. Jack leaned on the rail and watched her move. Her hands were gentle, her voice low. She soothed the animal as if it was her own. Tommy whispered from behind him, "She is good for this place." Jack did not answer. He already knew. That night, he found another small loaf on his porch. Still warm, still without a note. He held it in both hands. Something in him shifted. Slow, quiet, deep. The first signs of spring crept into the valley. Snow thinned on the south ridge. Water dripped from the barn roof in slow, steady beats. The road that had been buried for months began to clear. That was when the stranger arrived. Jack was repairing a fence post when he saw a rider pushing up the trail. The man wore a black coat and carried a smug look, as if he owned the land he rode on. His horse was tired, but his eyes were sharp and mean. He stopped at the gate, looking for a woman named Eleanor Briggs. "She belongs to me." Jack felt his jaw tighten. "No one belongs to you." The man smiled. "You got the wrong girl. The agency sent her by mistake. I came to collect what is owed. Either you pay for the trouble, or she comes back with me." Eleanor stepped out of the calf barn. Her face went pale. Her hands shook. "Jack, that is Amos. He is my stepbrother." Amos pointed at her suitcase sitting in the corner of the porch like a threat waiting to be used. "Pack your things. Now." Eleanor froze. Old fear returned to her eyes. Fear Jack had not seen since the first day she arrived. She looked at Jack as if hoping for something she was afraid to ask for. Jack stepped between her and Amos. His voice was low and steady. "She is not leaving." Amos laughed. "You think you can keep her?" Jack moved closer. "I do not think. I know." The fight was short. A swing. A stumble in the mud. Jack took a hit to the chin, but Amos hit the ground harder. When Amos tried to rise, Jack pulled him up by the coat and pushed him toward the gate. "You come back here again, and I will bury you in the cold ground out there." She stays because she chooses to stay. Amos spat blood. Anger flared in his eyes, but fear flickered too. He turned his horse and rode off without another word. Eleanor stood trembling beside the porch. Tears filled her eyes. Not from fear, from something else. Someone had finally stood up for her. Jack sat at the table while Eleanor cleaned the shallow cut on his cheek. Her hands were gentle, her touch warm. The house felt different with her near, less empty, less cold. "You should not have done that," she whispered. "You could have been hurt." "I have been hurt before," Jack said. "That man had no right to speak to you like that." Eleanor pressed the cloth to his cheek. Her eyes shone. "People have said worse. For a long time." Jack held her wrist before she could pull away. "Not here." She looked up. The fire snapped in the stove. The room felt small, close. "You saved my calf," he said. "You worked through storms. You held this place together. You do not owe that man anything." Her voice broke. "I did not think anyone would fight for me." Jack released her wrist slowly. "I would." The words slipped out, quiet but solid. They hung in the room like a truth waiting to be accepted. Eleanor looked at him for a long moment. She sat down beside him. They did not speak. They did not need to. Outside, the land thawed under the spring sun. Inside the house, something thawed as well. Something they both felt. Something neither of them feared anymore. Snow fell in soft flakes over the Hollister ranch. The barn glowed with warm lantern light. Strings of small candles lined the beams. The old calf pen was cleaned and swept. A fresh wreath hung on the door. Jack stood under the rafters in a clean shirt and vest. Eleanor walked toward him in a simple winter dress with a ribbon in her hair. Her cheeks were pink from the cold. Her smile held the peace she had searched for all her life. Gus Bishop read the vows. Tommy stood as witness. The calf they saved a year ago stood nearby, now grown and strong. When it was time for Jack to speak, he cleared his throat. "Last year, I thought I had been tricked," he said. "But I was wrong. I was given a gift I did not deserve." Eleanor's eyes filled, but she did not look away. Jack took her hands. "You are my home. Not this place. You." They kissed while snow drifted in slow circles outside the barn door. Christmas had returned. But this time, they did not face it alone. Night settled over the valley. Lantern light glowed from the windows of the barn. Jack and Eleanor stood together near the open door. Snowflakes melted on Eleanor's hair. Jack wrapped an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him without fear or doubt. The ranch lay quiet. The cattle slept. The trees whispered under the winter sky. Eleanor looked up at her husband. "It feels different this year." Jack nodded. "Because we built it together." Inside the barn, the candles flickered. The air smelled of pine, warm hay, and new beginnings. They stayed there for a long time. No hurry, no fear, only the steady heartbeat of a life they finally shared. Their first Christmas together had been a storm. Their next Christmas was a home.